Roxo Media House.
From the Flying T studio at Roxo Media House, this is Frogs Today, featuring former quarterback Sean Stilly. The voice of the SMU Mustangs, Rich Phillips. Plus our roundtable of experts. And now here's your host of Frogs Today, the voice of the Frogs, Brian Estridge.
Welcome into the Friday edition of Frogs Today. Yes, that's right. We're getting ready for game day tomorrow at 11 o'clock in Dallas when the Horned Frogs will walk into a hostile environment, a sold-out house at Gerald J. Ford Stadium for the matchup with the 2-1 SMU Mustangs, the 101st meeting all-time between these two teams. Frogs have not beaten SMU since 2018. Think that's on the minds of these guys? Yeah, it might very well be. We got a great show lined up for you, as a matter of fact. Rich Phillips, the longtime voice of the SMU Mustangs, will join us. We got a round table of experts with a new addition this week that will stop by a little bit later on. We'll kind of break down this matchup and give you some insight into what may happen tomorrow morning. But first, we had a chance earlier in the week we'd catch up with another former TCU quarterback. Last week, it was Jeff Ballard. This week, it's the great Sean Stilly, one of the class acts here in TCU football history. And we asked Sean about this TCU-SMU matchup and whether or not it was one that he had circled on his calendar every year.
You know, it was. Dennis Franchione was his first year in '98.
Yep.
And believe it or not, you know, on practice, we had Monday off. Tuesday, he had the SMU fight song playing over and over. I don't know if you remember that story.
Yes.
And it was loud and super annoying. So come game time, I mean, we hated it. We were so revved up for it. But, you know, also starting off, when I looked at the series schedule, I think SMU was up 11 games or something like that. I mean, it was like, oh, we're never going to flip this script. And so far now it's in favor of TCU by what, 9 or 10?
9 or 10. I mean, it literally flipped.
It did.
You know, and it did it in a two-decade period.
Right.
Is when it happened. When you think about this game, you came out of Lake Highlands. To go to TCU, I mean, did it mean a little something extra to you, the fact that you were that close to Dallas?
It did. In fact, you know, my dad took me to a lot of SMU games, you know, when I was in junior high coming up. And so I was a little partial, too. I watched Ramon Flanagan, you know, in his days, and he was like a 5-year, 6-year player. And it did. And I was getting recruited heavily by them, too. And, in fact, the guy that was recruiting me and JT Ogdenbaugh, who was also from Lake Highlands, man, he was hurt when we decided to come to TCU. So he couldn't figure out why we bought into a 1-10 program, and you know it's funny how things turn out now. And you know I've got customers over, and I just had lunch with them today, and they're all, you know, some of them are on the board at SMU. So it being so close to home definitely factors in a lot.
Best decision you ever made, though.
No, by far.
But you think about it. I mean, where this program has come since you and JT and that group made that commitment. It's pretty amazing, isn't it, when you look at the facilities and everything?
It's incredible. Walking in on a recruiting visit, and I'll never forget just that same smell of the locker room and of that upstairs area where Franchione had his office, and thinking, I can't believe we're going to buy into this program. And if you could fast forward and seeing what I would, it'd have been a no-brainer.
Right.
But to us, it was, and it was a lot to buy into, and it didn't happen overnight. There are so many steps and people along the way, and coaches and fans and alumni and boosters that have all been a part of this thing since the day one that I stepped foot on campus. And it's been a nice progression to see.
You had a great run at TCU, man. I still remember the Colorado State game and the Liberty Bowl. I mean, there's so many that kind of stack up with memories. I mean, when you think back on it, do you consider yourself blessed to be the quarterback at TCU?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely I do. And sometimes it just seems surreal when I see what these guys do now and the yards they put up. and the numbers,
Right.
You know, I mean, they set up. It's like we would run to set up the pass. Now they pass to set up the run.
Right.
And to see what they do and the success they have, it's hard to put me in that situation of how they're mobile and how they move and how fast they get the ball out. And it does. It's surreal sometimes to look back and think I actually did that. It seems so far now that it's different. I feel so far removed, but and things have changed so much. But for sure, it's exciting.
You might be a tight end in Sonny Dykes' offense.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and even they don't touch it that much.
I know.
They got a couple of good looking ones out there.
I know they do. They got some really good H-back tight ends this year. Dick Winder is the guy that influenced you a lot. We had Jeff Ballard on last week, and it was interesting to hear Jeff say. I asked him. I said, "Hey, when did you realize you were that you had that kind of gamer mode?" Because he was 19-2 as a starter, and he said, "Well, I thought I had it in high school." Dick Winder broke it, but then he brought it back.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the way Coach Winder. You listen to these quarterbacks, the influence they had on them back in the day was unbelievable.
It was, and Jeff especially is a perfect example because he was in the same meeting room that I was in.
Yes.
And Jeff was a scout team guy that, and they'd almost written him off.
Right.
And when I was there, of course, it was my turn. It was my senior year.
Yeah.
And Jeff's turn came later, but Winder changed my life. Not just the game of football, but what he instilled in me and how to pop up when you've been knocked down, how not to get too high, how to handle adversity. I mean, things that I take with me 20 years later with my children, with my wife, with my business, with everything that I learned from him is toughness. And kids these days, I don't think, I always often wonder, what are my kids going to go through? Because like I was just telling you earlier, off air, is my son's playing football, and I cringe watching him play. Now I know what my mom and dad went through watching me, and but it's like, does he have to go through that to learn the life lessons that I do, or can he learn it some other way? But there are some things that I take with me and I use every single day, and I miss that man so much. I wish I could have one more conversation with him.
Yeah, he coached you guys like linebackers, though.
Super tough.
I mean, he coached you like linebackers. I love that about him.
Oh, yeah. I came out one time, I had a purple chin strap, it was a Terrence Dunbar. It had all this flare and stuff coming out, and he threw me one of those. We were playing Tulane, and I put that thing on, and Winder said, "Get that thing off your mouth." I was like, "Yes, sir." He didn't want to be prima donna. He didn't like all that stuff. He didn't like tattoos. He just wanted you to get out there and work hard to play.
Gotta love him. You talked about the influence that he had on you. When you were in college at TCU, I think a lot of folks know the story. You went through some tough times. But he was there. This coaching staff, that really the TCU family sort of took you in. Did they not?
They did, and it was obvious to bridge the gap. I was from Casey Printers, the old quarterback, to Ty Gunn or whoever the next young up and comer was. We had a ton of good talent, recruits, and they didn't say it specifically, but we were all on the same page. Yeah, look, you can play. Yeah. You showed as a junior you can play. What we're gonna do is instill. You're not the most talented guy in the world. You're not the fastest. You don't throw it the hardest, but if you can get the ball we have playmakers all around. If you can put the ball in their hands without putting us in a bad position, we can win games. Yeah. And that's what we did.
But I was thinking more along the lines of even personal stuff that you went through. Oh, yeah. And the fact that they kind of enveloped you.
Oh, yeah, they did. Yeah. And it's like a family, and still always was. Yeah. My mom went through battling cancer and just, just hanging in there, too, and not giving up. These days a lot of kids can move on if things don't work out their way. Right. They taught me how to fight. They taught me how to, and not just me, a lot of my teammates.
I mean, you think about it. Sean Stilly shows up at TCU, ends up being the starting quarterback. He marries a cheerleader. I mean, you got it made, man. And you've been successful in business. Tell us what you're doing right now.
Yeah, still the same thing. So me and BJ Roberts both, he came out a year early. He was a tight end. Came out a year before I did. And he took off in sales and was running a huge team. And we've been we sell underground utilities, PVC pipe, construction material. And we've been doing it for 18 years, and it's still going strong, man. Stronger than ever. Yeah. And with the economy and the things that have happened since 11, we bought and sold a couple of times, and we just continue to go to work. Yeah. We continue to sell, and 2011 we thought we broke a record. Well, 12 went higher, 13 went higher, and awesome. 2022 it just keeps going up. Yeah. So
and BJ's been so successful, I can't call him BJ anymore now, right?
Bruce.
I got to call him Bruce.
Yeah, like everybody else does.
Bruce. He's Bruce. All right, real quick. You've seen Max. You've seen Chandler. Frogs coming up here tomorrow against SMU. Give me your thoughts real quick.
Man, I think the Frogs look great. I think they get the ball out fast. I think Max looked tremendous for a guy that could have had his spot stolen or taken from him, and all the hard work that he's put in and being like number 4 in all-time passing. You couldn't tell at all that he was upset. I mean, the way he took the field and was in command, I almost think it helped him. Yeah. And I think him leading, doesn't matter which one of them it is. And I even like Jackson if he gets to play. Yeah. He's electric. So I think they've done a great job with those quarterbacks and receivers. I think they have tons of talent, playmakers. It's just who you're going to get the ball to. Right. So it's exciting.
It is fun to watch.
I'm surprised it's 1.5. No.
Yeah, I know.
Is that still? Is it still?
I think
that?
it is. I think somebody's missing something there.
I do too.
Yeah, I think
I do too.
Yeah, Sean Stilly. You're the
Great
best,
to see
man.
you. Yeah,
appreciate one of the good guys right there. I love this guy. Sean Stilly joining us here on Frogs Today. More to come, including our roundtable of experts where we continue after this timeout.
Dave's Hot Chicken is a cult favorite and now has 2 locations in Fort Worth, Bryant Irvin Road on I-20 and Berry Street at TCU, both owned and operated by Horned Frogs. Mention the Frogs Today show and get 10% off anytime and order online at daveshotchicken.com.
The Flying T Club provides the everyday TCU fan and alum the ability to specifically support TCU student athletes. Flying T Club offers 3 levels of memberships. The Flying T Club is a nonprofit organization supporting the brand development of TCU student athletes through a series of unique event-based networking opportunities, which are exclusive to our members. These events provide a great social engagement tool for our members and student athletes alike. Follow them on Instagram at Flying T Club or online at flyingtclub.com.
Texas-based Happy Water offers the best-tasting, sugar-free kids drink ever made. Happy Water comes in 4 delicious flavors that you can find at local retailers and on Amazon. Each pouch contains 0 grams of sugar, 0 calories, and 0% juice. Head to happydrinks.com for more information and to purchase Happy Water. That's HAPI drinks.com. Live happy. Be happy. Drink happy.
For exclusive interviews and content on TCU recruits, subscribe now at frogstoday.com. Any sport, anytime. It's your source for all things TCU. Only on frogstoday.com. Welcome back into Frogs Today. Our next guest for 2 decades has manned the mic in Dallas for the SMU Mustangs, and he's kind enough to give us some time here today prior to the 101st meeting now between the Frogs and the Mustangs tomorrow at 11 o'clock. His name is Rich Phillips, and he joins us via Zoom. Rich, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Brian. How are you?
Doing great. Let's dive right into this one. Obviously, the storyline is the return of Sonny Dykes to the Hilltop. I thought Rhett did a great job this week of kind of diffusing it and say, listen, we owe a lot to Sonny here at SMU. We, as players, as coaches, he said, heck, if it wasn't for Sonny, I wouldn't be here. There's something to be said for that, isn't there?
Absolutely. And, you know, the fact is, too, and he pointed it out when he and I spoke earlier this week, Sonny did a lot of good for the SMU program. I mean, his 4 years here, 3 of them especially, the last 3, fantastic, better than that has been seen in 35 years. It was kind of bitter the way it all ended at the end of last season. And I think that's why there's still some of the ill will, especially for the fans. But I think Rhett's done a great job of trying to settle his guys down. You know, Rashee Rice didn't have any wild comments this week, things like that. That I think is somewhat a reflection of how the coach has been dealing with the team.
Yeah, and I think it says something about Rhett Lashley that you've got Rashee Rice, you've got Mordecai, you've got these players who have contributed over the years who stayed in Dallas, who stayed at SMU, and really create a core now of guys who, well, for lack of a better term, they know what it's supposed to look like, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tanner Mordecai, fantastic last season, a 39 touchdown season and school record in his first year as a starter in college football, stays here. You mentioned Rashee Rice. I mean, hey, there were some concerns that transfer portal might have been calling his name after the coaching change. A number of guys on the defensive side too, right there in the middle of that defense, Elijah Chapman, DeVere Levelston. These are veteran guys who know how to get it done inside there and guys that have stayed here ready to play for their new coach.
This is Rhett's offense, obviously, and you see flashes of the Auburn run game in it at times, although they've even said they haven't necessarily settled on that one guy at running back, still by committee a little bit, huh?
Very much so. Seen a lot of Trey Siggers. A couple of weeks ago, he was hurt. Velton Gardner, a transfer from Kansas out of Skyline High School, got a lot of run. TJ McDaniel, who's come back from a really gruesome broken foot 2 years ago, has gotten a lot of run. And then we're still kind of waiting on Kamar Wheaton. He's an Alabama transfer out of Lakeview Centennial, who was a 5-star guy coming out of high school, was hurt last year, redshirted at Alabama. They've been really working him in slowly so far this season. We're still waiting to see him to be featured heavily in the run game at some point.
Wide receiving core, obviously, you can't not talk about Rice. I know that Moochie Dixon came on a little bit last week for you. I mean, guys starting to emerge in that category?
Definitely Moochie has come up as a bit of a playmaker for him, one of the many transfers. Jake Bailey, a guy, too, who transferred from Rice, led Rice in receiving last year. He was hurt at the start of the season coming out of camp, but came on to play better last week in the loss at Maryland. But it's all begins and ends with Rashee Rice. I mean, last week at Maryland, he's double teamed. He's drawing pass interferences. He's catching passes while drawing pass interference at the same time. He's been remarkable in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, targeted 20-plus times last week. Already has 28 catches on the season. If there was a question about this group offensively, would it be the offensive line, Rich?
Definitely in some areas, especially if you ask about depth, because you and I spoke on the phone the other day about this. When you look at their two deep, well, Justin Osborne's all over it because he's the backup at almost every position. He is the starting right guard. They really feel they have 6 solid starters. And of course, you can only start 5. Joe Bissinger started at left guard last week because of illness to Jalen Thomas. The first 5, though, very solid. They've been very happy with them. Marcus Bryant's moved over to play left tackle this year, a massive guy, and he's graded out very well so far at the left tackle spot. They've added a couple of transfers, including Owen Condit, who's playing right tackle. Depth was where the concern would be in that offensive line should anybody go down.
Rich, when I look at this defense, the thing that stands out to me, and maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but are 10 of the 11 starters seniors?
I guess I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, it's a veteran group. And a few of them transfers, but guys that have been here. I mean, at middle linebacker, Isaac Slade-Matautia transferred last year, but he's definitely a senior. And I mentioned Levelston and Chapman there in the middle of the defensive line. Yeah, Gary Wiley, Nelson Paul, those guys. They got a ton of experience. I didn't even notice it, man. But they got a lot of guys that have played a lot of football here so far.
Of course, with COVID, who's a senior anymore? I mean, doesn't even matter.
Some of them are in their 6th year. So
right, 6 or 7. All right, this one always comes down to emotion, though. I mean, these guys have talked about players have to execute, and they do. But there's a lot of emotion in this game. It seems like every year that SMU gives TCU their best shot, vice versa. That's a hard-hitting, physical kind of game. Do you get that sense too?
To an extent. I know that's something Rhett Lashley's trying to tone down here. His message at the start of the week to his team was, we need to be passionate, but not emotional, because he feels if you get emotional, you start to maybe try to do too much. You make mistakes. And Rhett has a ton of experience in rivalry games, largely from his two different stints as an assistant at Auburn. So he was in 6 Iron Bowls, and among them, the kick 6 that they won, of course, at Auburn over Alabama back in 2013. So that's been his message all week. Passionate, not emotional. I asked him this morning, I was like, will you know before game time if that message has gotten through to your players? He said, oh yeah, it has. He's confident it has.
All right. You've sold out the place as well to welcome Sonny back. The atmosphere at LJ Ford, give Frog fans some idea of what they can anticipate.
It's going to be, this is, you mentioned it, my 22nd season doing the games. I can't believe that there's been one that's been anywhere nearly as hyped up as this. I'm really interested to see what it's going to sound like when Sonny Dykes leads the team out of the tunnel onto the field. It's going to be different than I think I've heard in 22 years there at Ford Stadium. This one has been circled on the calendar since November of last year. Even before he officially got the job, I think everybody was already looking at this on the schedule last year.
And then you crank up American play the next week, right? Central Florida.
Go to UCF next week. Big one for Rhett next week too. Playing his old boss Gus Malzahn.
That's right. He's got back-to-back old bosses here. He's getting things. Yeah, that's tough. Rich Phillips, always appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us here today. Looking forward to this matchup, the Frogs and the SMU Mustangs tomorrow.
All right, thanks a lot, Brian.
There goes Rich Phillips joining us here on Frogs Today. Our roundtable of experts happens next.
Say hello to the water of tomorrow. Richard's Rainwater. Richard's Rainwater is 100% rain, refreshing, renewable, and the only ingredient we use in our water. Why rain? Because everyone deserves access to clean water, and rain is a 100% renewable resource available everywhere. Drink the rain. Save the planet. Shop now at richardsrainwater.com.
Dave's Hot Chicken is a cult favorite. and now has 2 locations in Fort Worth, Bryant Irvin Road on I-20 and Berry Street at TCU. Both owned and operated by Horned Frogs. Mention the Frogs Today show and get 10% off anytime. And order online at daveshotchicken.com.
For exclusive interviews and content on TCU recruits, subscribe now at frogstoday.com. Any sport, anytime. It's your source for all things TCU. Only on frogstoday.com. The Flying T Club provides the everyday TCU fan and alum the ability to specifically support TCU student athletes. Flying T Club offers 3 levels of memberships. The Flying T Club is a nonprofit organization supporting the brand development of TCU student athletes through a series of unique event-based networking opportunities, which are exclusive to our members. These events provide a great social engagement tool for our members and student athletes alike. Follow them on Instagram at Flying T Club or online at flyingtclub.com. Frogs Today on a Friday continues as we get ready for the 101st meeting between TCU and SMU tomorrow at 11 a.m. Early start over at Gerald J. Ford Stadium. Right now it is time for our roundtable of experts. We might have at least 2 here with us today. Melissa Treibwasser joins us. We always appreciate her time. We'll give her credit for being one of the experts. Melissa, good to see you.
9 a.m. Pacific on that one. 9
that's
a.m.
right.
Pacific for me tomorrow.
That's right. She's our
early.
Pacific time zone reporter there in front of the California Redwood. Our other expert here joining us right now is a new addition to the Frogs Today staff. Drew Davison's with us. You remember him from the Star Telegram. Drew, good to have you on board, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here and alleged expert.
Yeah, right.
You don't need to go dig up some of my old predictions.
That's right.
You know, the expert may not.
It may not apply.
Stay true.
Yeah, I can say that about you two because these other two, they call themselves experts. No, I'm kidding. David Bowden's here.
Never said that about
Jamie
myself.
Plunkett's alongside as well. All right, let's dive right into this thing. SMU, TCU, huge rivalry. The storyline is Sonny going back to Dallas. The Frogs have tried to make, nothing out of it. SMU's trying to make more out of it. Melissa, give me the vibe right now. What are you sensing?
I mean, I think that TCU is trying so hard, like you said, to not make this an emotional game. But the guys in the locker room have read every single thing, have heard everything on Twitter, have seen all the smack talk coming out of Highland Park, and they're going to want this one bad for their guy. SMU has been hilarious in the fact that they have both been literally in tears about losing Sonny Dykes, but also simultaneously telling us that he's not any good. So this is a big game for TCU. It's kind of a big game for the Sonny Dykes era, and I think that TCU players are going to rise to the occasion and get behind their head coach.
Drew, you were kind of covering that story when it was all transpiring, that coach search and how it unfolded. It did not end. It never ends well at a place, but there is some animosity there. You get the sense. But I also get the sense that Sonny Dykes pays it no attention.
Yeah, I think Sonny, was ready. At the end of the day, obviously SMU fans won't want to hear it, but you're going from Group of 5 to Power 5. It's kind of a natural transition for a coach, and kind of like Melissa said too. It's a lot of Sonny was able to keep a lot of the players intact. So the players certainly know how the last 2 years went, and that feeling you got to think is still in their head, and credit to Dykes and his staff for not much turnover this offseason. But yeah, as far as Sonny's concerned, he's kind of been around. This is his 4th program. He's been in rivalry games. He's kind of been there, done that, experienced veteran. So yeah, I don't really think he's going to get too high or too low. Although I'm sure come 10:45 a.m. when he's walking out of that tunnel, I'm sure more emotions and butterflies and jitters will be coming back to him. But as far as the game itself, I'm sure preparation has been pretty much standard.
Yeah, and I think Rhett Lashley talked about it this week too, Jamie, when he said, Sonny deserves a lot of credit for this program at SMU. And he said, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Sonny. These players wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Sonny. And he's kind of diffused the situation, I feel like, in Dallas.
I think he certainly has, and good on Rhett Lashley for doing that in the midst of what is going to be a really high emotional game, because he's right. Sonny Dykes took an SMU program that was absolutely reeling, and it had been reeling since the death penalty in the mid 80s. Yeah. They had only had 1 or 2 winning seasons since coming back from the death penalty, and what he did to resurrect that program in such a short amount of time is incredibly impressive. And to do that at SMU of all places is really fantastic. But now, obviously, there's no love lost there.
I feel like you just wrote off the Phil Bennett era pretty quickly there, Jamie. I mean, good gracious. Let's talk X's and O's right now with David Bowden, because that's what it's going to come down to, folks. And I bring that up as part of this because we talk about all these storylines and all this stuff around it. It comes down to the players, doesn't it? And it comes down to execution. And, yeah, there may be a little bit of emotion in those first 3 minutes. After that first hit, though, that all kind of goes away, doesn't it?
Yeah, no question. I think Sonny's done a really good job, though. We're going back to, you talk about diffusing it on TCU's side. And I think that's going to play into the actual game because he's done a good job of just keeping all that stuff at bay and not getting too high, too low. That's sort of his MO, right?
Yeah.
He does a really nice job as the leader of the program of being even keel throughout the year. So like he talked about in his presser this week, you don't roll into Oklahoma and all of a sudden, how do you get ramped up for that one if you put all your chips in for SMU, right?
Yeah.
And so I think on the field, you look at it, Vegas came out, and for whatever that's worth, at the beginning they were, the underdogs, and all of a sudden I've seen it no higher than 2.5 points the other way.
Right.
I'm looking at it, and I look, all the cliches, you throw out the records and all that kind of stuff when it comes to these type of games. But if you're just looking at the players on the field, in my opinion, TCU is just a lot better.
Right.
Now, how that plays out, that's why again, this is a big expert talk here, but it's why you play the games.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, but if you're just looking at it from that standpoint, they're a better football team.
Well, I want to stick with you because I want these guys to react what you're about to tell us here. One of the areas that I know you saw some shortcomings from SMU is on defense. Some concerns over there.
Yeah, I think right now, I mean, they play quarter safeties, right? And what that means in the run game is that that's the run support. They're involved in the run fit and sort of running that J path, that banana path, coming running the alley. And honestly, they're just not getting it done right now when it comes to stopping the run. Linebackers seem a little bit, sometimes they can play with their feet in the mud a little bit. I don't, discount the players when it comes to that. A lot of times, you're still learning a new scheme and going through some different things for them. And so their reads can be a little bit slower, but it's showing up on film. And so, I think by this time they should start to work out some of those things, but it's definitely an area I think they can attack in terms of the run game.
Here's the thing, though, Melissa. We can talk about the defense all we want for SMU, but we know with Rhett Lashley there that it's going to be about the offense, and as long as they've got Tanner Mordecai at quarterback, they got a chance, right?
Well, I think, I did an interview with Joseph Hoyt, the Dallas Morning News, earlier this week to get the inside scoop. And the thing that he said is what SMU is trying to learn right now is, are they a one-trick pony with Rashee Rice, Tanner Mordecai, and that connection? He was targeted 20 times in the Maryland game, had 11 catches, well over 150-something yards. But that seems to be the only person that Mordecai is comfortable finding right now. Well, that one trick is still pretty dang good. So Mordecai has got that gunslinger mentality, and if he's really trying to force the ball into Rice, I think that plays right into TCU's hands because he can be a little bit mistake prone, and he can take a few chances into double teams, etc. Try to fit that ball into small windows. So I'm going to be really interested to see if it does all come down to Mordecai to Rice, or if TCU is able to take away that top option, or at least contain him to the point that Mordecai has to make his second, third read on down the line. The running game for SMU also still quite a bit of a question mark. They lost 2 talented players from last year's team and haven't quite made that the focal point of the offense yet. So I think that there are some opportunities for TCU to kind of funnel SMU into what they want the Mustangs to do, as opposed to allowing SMU and Rhett Lashley to dictate the pace of the game.
Which kind of feeds right into Joe Gillespie's thinking, Jamie. I mean, he's a guy who says he likes to force an offense's hand. He doesn't like it to be the other way. And if Sonny Dykes says that this defense that Joe Gillespie runs gave him the most trouble at SMU, doesn't that also apply to Rhett Lashley's offense and the potential for this to give them a bunch of trouble at SMU?
Oh, absolutely it does. And I think Coach and I talked about this a couple episodes ago on Dissecting the Frogs. This is probably the most solid 3 kind of odd stack, odd front defense at stopping the run. And so when you look at an SMU offense that's already struggled in the running game this year, and now you've got a defense that's really capable against that run, and you've got corners like Josh Newton and Trey Hodges-Tomlinson on the outside who are totally capable of going one-on-one with a single threat like Rashee Rice, this is a real recipe for opportunity here for the Horned Frogs to come out and make a statement after 2 wins that were fine, but against competition that, frankly, is not as good as SMU is right now.
But you can say the same thing about SMU, can you not, Drew? I mean, North Texas, not good this year. Right. Lamar, not good. They lose to Maryland, coached by Michael Oxley, which was a bit of a surprise for some folks. So we don't really know about them either, do we?
No, I think SMU and TCU, for that matter, there's a lot undecided. But I will say, if you look at the Maryland game, they were able to get pressure on Mordecai, force those throws, and make him, kind of try and fit it in. In TCU, they've only had 2 sacks. Granted, it's early, but they need to get some pressure on the quarterback. And they haven't had really a consistent pass rush since Ben Bannigan and LJ Collier when I was first year on the beat, right? That was a while ago. Yeah. So they have to get, the Dylan Hortons and Dominic Williams. They've got to find that interior rush and get some pressure on the quarterback. Because Mordecai, like you alluded to earlier, if he's got time, he'll find the open man.
Yeah, he can spin it. There's no question about that. All right, the Frogs offensively. Max Duggan has, SMU's kind of circled on his calendar, you got to believe. Let's just put it that way. He gets an opportunity here, over there. Sonny told us earlier in the week that he felt like Max may have played his best game of his career in that game against Charlton. Was much better, quicker getting rid of the football. Things were happening, clicking a lot faster. Did you see that as well? Didn't throw it out of bounds on deep balls, things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's hard to argue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and the numbers back it up, certainly from the Charlton game. But, he was getting the ball out in rhythm, right? He wasn't getting flooded. Now, a lot of that had to do with, the offensive line versus their defense. But I think going into this week, and I think we've talked about this in the past, but for a game like this that's this emotional, with a guy who really wants it, but he's also just a tough, gritty guy. I think that's the guy I want, honestly, in a game like this. So I'm excited to see what he'll do there, and not only just in the pass game, but when they need a tough 3rd and 1 or something like that, if they allow him to go lower his shoulder, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Special teams always a big part of this game too. Over the years, I mean, you think about it, returns have been big. I mean, I think back to some of the returns that the Frogs had over there. I remember a big play on a special teams here. Another return, but I was thinking there was a big hit also. Ryan Christian was involved in a big special teams play over the years. That's going to figure in. You got to believe it. 2 of the best punters in the country, by the way, going at it. Not that anybody cares, other than me. All right, let's do this. Let's find out what we think these experts think will happen on Saturday morning. Melissa, let's start with you. Our producer Joel is taking notes, so he's writing down these scores, and we're gonna be able to compare them. So, what do you think?
I don't like when we put it in writing. Maybe write this in pencil. But, the thing that I keep coming back to is there is one person in a TCU uniform that has a win in this rivalry on the field on Saturday, and that's Alana Lee because he was at SMU. And so this senior class, TCU hasn't beat SMU since 2018. And so a lot of these guys have never played and won this game. I think it's going to be a motivating factor, absolutely, for sure, for Saturday morning. And I think you're going to see TCU come out with a lot of fire. We're going to see what Rhett Lashley has early. He's going to come out with his first big swing. And I think that TCU is going to be able to withstand that first swing and come back and take control in the second half of a tired, worn down SMU team. So I'm going TCU 37, SMU 31.
Ooh, high scoring, kind of tight. All right, newbie, what do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I agree with Melissa. I think it's going to be high scoring, and I think TCU will like having Max Duggan on their side, especially if you look at the Maryland game. They rushed for more than they passed, and I think, obviously their quarterback had success running the ball. I think Max brings that for TCU. I won't go quite as high scoring, but I do see like a 34-28 win for the Frogs.
All right, Jamie.
I agree with both. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but defensively for TCU, I think the goal has to be limiting SMU in that passing game. I mean, they gave up 17 points to Tarleton State. They gave up some big passing plays and man-to-man coverage out on the outside there. So that's going to be a fun matchup to watch. If TCU can manage that well, then I think they win by 10-plus points in this one, somewhere around 35-24.
35-24, he says. All right, Coach. You've seen the numbers.
Yeah, TCU is just a better football team. So if they do what they're supposed to do, I don't think it'd be close.
Yeah.
I look at everyone's talking about Rashee Rice, and he's a super talent. Last year they had him more in the slot. This year where he's going to be. At least to this point, he's their right receiver. When they're in tempo, they don't want to swap the outside receivers. So they put him on the outside to the right. So if you want, whatever matchup you want, you have it. So I think it'll slow down a little bit. I'm going 34-20.
34-20.
TCU.
One of the things they talked about when they were in tempo that they struggled with last week against Maryland was recognizing the fronts that Maryland was showing them, their offensive line. It's an offensive line, by the way, that's not very deep, really 6 deep. across the front for SMU. So that could be a factor as well. I'm you know what? I've been listening. I've been drinking the Kool-Aid here from Coach Bowden all week. He's been watching film. He's too scared to say this. I'm not. I think it's 31-3 TCU. That's what I think.
Sure, this might be the week that you're correct.
Maybe, because Bowden's been right every week prior.
Thank you.
But I'm buying into what you're telling me, that this defense of theirs struggles. You know, that they're kind of, as Melissa talked about earlier, they might be a one-trick pony. Rhett Lashley even talked about the fact that they've been running back by committee. Nobody's separated themselves. They're a little dinged up in some spots, I'm hearing as well. So 31-3. All right. Melissa, always good to see you.
Good to be here, as always.
All right. And these three guys, always fun to have them around. Thanks for joining us this week on Frogs Today. Thanks to Sean Stilly for stopping by. Rich Phillips as well, the voice of the SMU Mustangs. Going to be a big day. By the way, coming up tomorrow, we got a little pregame show for you here at Frogs Today. Jamie, David will be here. We got Marshall Newhouse coming by as well. So it's going to be a big day.
Fun little feature about some guys going undercover over in Dallas as well.
Ooh, this could be interesting. Joe College. We'll get into that tomorrow. A little TCU SMU pregame. Enjoy the game tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Thanks for joining us here tonight on Frogs Today.
Frogs Today is brought to you by the Flying Tea Club, supporting TCU student athletes, and by Richard's Rainwater. Say hello to the water of tomorrow. Frogs Today is a production of Roxo Media House.
Roxo Media House.